The grand hall of Xirian's royal palace was filled with towering warriors, their silver armor reflecting the golden flames of the torches. The air was heavy with the scent of burning incense and the tension of warriors eager for a show. Princess Scalira, the 18-year-old heir to the throne, sat on her elevated seat, her piercing golden eyes locked onto the human standing before her. Commander Ethan Voss, a representative of humanity, stood in the center of the chamber. His black combat armor gleamed under the firelight, its advanced plating a symbol of Earth's technological progress. To the Xirionians, however, armor was a sign of weakness. Only the fragile hid behind metal. And to them, humans were the most fragile beings in the galaxy. Scalira's lips curled into a smirk. She rested her clawed fingers against her chin and tilted her head. So this is what humanity has to offer. Her voice was laced with amusement. A man who hides behind his metal shell. Are humans so delicate that they cannot face the world bare? The warriors around her chuckled, their deep voices echoing across the chamber. Ethan, however, remained calm. He had expected this reaction. The Xirionians were a race bred for war, their muscular frames and thick exoskeletal plates making them natural-born fighters. To them, physical strength was the only measure of power. Ethan met the princess's gaze, his expression unreadable. "I wear armor not because I am weak," he said, his voice steady, "but because I am prepared." Scalira laughed, standing from her throne. She was taller than Ethan, standing nearly 8 feet in height, her royal blue skin shimmering under the firelight. Her battle scars were visible across her arms, proof of the countless wars she had fought. "Prepared? Then prove it," she challenged, stepping down from her throne. "Remove your armor, human. Show us what lies beneath." A hush fell over the room. The warriors stopped laughing. Some leaned forward, eager to see if the human would accept the challenge. No outsider had ever dared to stand against a Xirionian in their natural form. Ethan could feel the weight of every gaze upon him, but he did not hesitate. He reached up and unlatched the clasps of his armor. Piece by piece, the protective plating fell away, revealing the scared and battle-hardened body beneath. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The Xirionians had expected to see a weak, frail being, but instead they saw a warrior. Ethan's muscles were lean but defined, his body marked with old wounds that told stories of past battles. He was not born with natural armor, but he had something else: resilience. Scalira's smirk faded slightly as she examined him. His body was not like that of a Xirionian, but it was clear he was no stranger to pain. Unlike her people, who relied on inherited strength, humans built their power through struggle and endurance. One of the warriors, a massive figure named General Korvac, crossed his arms. "Interesting," he muttered. "But without his armor, he is still nothing." Ethan took a step forward, his gaze locked on Scalira. "Armor is just a tool," he said. "Strength isn't about what you're born with. It's about how much you're willing to endure." Scalira studied him for a moment before letting out a short chuckle. "Brave words for a soft-skinned creature," she said. "But words mean nothing here. Strength is proven, not spoken." She raised a hand, signaling one of her warriors forward. A massive Xirionian soldier stepped up, cracking his knuckles. His muscular frame dwarfed Ethan, and his grin showed sharp predatory teeth. "A simple test," Scalira said. "A show of strength. Let's see if humans are as tough as you claim." The crowd cheered in excitement. Ethan glanced at the warrior before him, already assessing his movements, his stance, his weaknesses. He wasn't the strongest in the room. He didn't need to be. He only needed to be smarter. As the Xirionian lunged forward, Ethan prepared himself. This would be the first step in proving that humanity was not weak. This was just the beginning. The grand hall fell silent as Ethan stood face to face with the towering Xirionian warrior. The alien's massive frame loomed over him, muscles rippling beneath his thick exoskeletal skin. The other warriors watched in anticipation, their golden eyes gleaming in the firelight. Princess Celira remained seated, her expression unreadable. She had expected the human to hesitate, maybe even refuse the challenge. Yet here he was, standing firm, his gaze unshaken. The warrior facing Ethan was called Gorek, one of the princess's elite guards. His clawed hands flexed, eager to make the first move. "You should have kept your armor, human," Gorek rumbled, his deep voice filled with confidence. Ethan smirked. Armor wouldn't make a difference. Gorek growled and lunged forward, his powerful arms swinging in a wide arc, aiming to grab Ethan and crush him in his grip. But Ethan was already moving. He sidestepped, his speed surprising the crowd. Gorek's hands closed around empty air, and before he could react, Ethan delivered a sharp strike to his ribs. The impact wasn't enough to injure, but it was enough to send a message. Ethan wasn't just standing there to lose. The watching warriors murmured in surprise. No human had ever dared fight without weapons or armor against a Zirionian. They had assumed Ethan would fall instantly, yet he was still standing. Gorek snarled, frustration flashing across his face. "You're fast, but speed won't save you." This time, he didn't lunge recklessly. He adjusted his stance, eyes locked on Ethan, trying to predict his next move. Ethan could tell that Gorek was learning, adapting mid-fight. The Zirionians weren't just brutish warriors. They were experienced fighters who had won countless battles. But Ethan had fought against impossible odds before. Humans were not the strongest, nor the fastest, but they were the most adaptable. Gorek rushed forward again, but this time he feinted left before pivoting, using his massive arm to block Ethan's escape route. Ethan's eyes flickered to the movement, just as he expected. Gorek was learning from his mistakes. But so was Ethan. At the last second, instead of dodging to the side, Ethan dropped low, sliding beneath Gorek's swinging arm. Before Gorek could react, Ethan jumped onto his back, wrapping an arm around his thick neck in a tight chokehold. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen a human move like this before. Gorek staggered, roaring in fury. He clawed at Ethan, trying to pull him off, but Ethan had lashed on firmly. He knew he couldn't outmatch the alien in pure strength, but he could outthink him. Zirionians were used to direct combat, where power determined the winner. They weren't trained to deal with grappling techniques, a fighting style humans had perfected for centuries. Gorek's movements became erratic, his strength working against him as he tried to shake Ethan off. But the more he struggled, the tighter Ethan's grip became. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Celira's golden eyes. She leaned forward, watching the human strategy unfold. "Enough," Gorek snarled, staggering backward. But his movements were slower now, his energy draining. His massive hand swung wildly, his breath turning heavy. Ethan saw the opening he needed. He suddenly released his grip and pushed off Gorek's back. The moment he landed on the ground, he twisted and delivered a powerful kick to the side of Gorek's knee. With a loud crack, Gorek's leg buckled. The warrior collapsed to the ground, his breath coming in short gasps. The hall was silent. Ethan stepped back, his body still tense, waiting for another attack. But Gorek did not rise. He placed a clawed hand on his knee, testing it. He could still move, but he had lost. A slow murmur spread through the watching warriors. They had expected an easy victory for Gorek, but this human had won using skill, not brute force. Celira stood from her throne, her piercing gaze locked onto Ethan. Something had changed in her expression. She walked forward, stopping in front of Ethan. "Impressive," she admitted, though her voice carried analyzing curiosity rather than admiration. "You do not fight like a Zirionian. You fight with intelligence." Ethan exhaled, shaking the tension from his arms. "We fight to survive," he said. "Strength is important, but so is strategy." Celira studied him for a long moment before turning to the crowd. "Today, we have witnessed something rare," she declared. "A human has stood against a Zirionian warrior without armor, without weapons, and still won." The warriors murmured, some nodding in reluctant approval, others still in disbelief. Then, Celira turned back to Ethan, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "But one fight does not prove your worth." She smirked, a hint of challenge in her gaze. "You are strong, human. But tell me, how will you fare against me?" The crowd erupted in excitement. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart still steady. He had expected this. From the moment he had stepped into this hall, he knew this wouldn't end with just one battle. He met Celira's gaze, a small smirk tugging at his lips. "If that's a challenge, princess," he said, rolling his shoulders, "then I accept." Celira's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Then prepare yourself, human," she said, stepping back toward her throne. "Tomorrow, you fight me." The crowd cheered, the excitement filling the hall. Ethan took a deep breath. The real challenge was only beginning. The sun had barely risen when the training grounds of the Zirionian palace were filled with warriors and nobles. Ethan stood in the center of the wide combat arena, his muscles tense but his mind calm. He had fought before, but today was different. Today, he was facing Princess Celira herself. The towering Zirionian warriors gathered around the edges, their golden eyes glowing with curiosity. They had seen Ethan defeat Gorek, one of their strongest fighters. But now, he was about to fight their princess, the finest warrior of their royal bloodline. Celira entered the arena, her tall and athletic form moving with a predatory grace. Her violet armor shimmered under the morning light, and she carried no weapon. She didn't need one. Her people were strong enough to fight with just their raw power. "You impressed me yesterday, human," Celira said, her voice steady. "But now you will see the difference between a warrior and a ruler." Ethan smirked. "Guess I'll have to survive long enough to notice the difference." Celira's lips curled into a confident grin. "Let's begin." A deep gong echoed through the air, signaling the start of the fight. Celira moved first, launching herself at Ethan with incredible speed. He barely had time to react before her palm struck out, aiming for his chest. Ethan dodged at the last second, rolling to the side, but the shockwave of her strike sent dust flying. She was faster than Gorek, and far more precise. Ethan had no time to hesitate. He sprang to his feet and launched a counterattack, feinting to the left before twisting and delivering a sharp kick to her side. But Celira was ready. She caught his leg midair with one hand, gripping it like a vice. A second later, she twisted, sending Ethan flying. He hit the ground hard but rolled with the impact, avoiding serious injury. The crowd murmured in approval. "Not bad," Ethan muttered as he got back up, dusting himself off. Celira tilted her head. "You're durable." "Good. That means this will last a little longer." She rushed him again, this time coming in with a low sweep kick. Ethan barely leaped over it, but the moment he landed, Celira was already on him. Her fist drove forward, aiming for his stomach. With no time to dodge, Ethan reacted on instinct. Instead of stepping back, he stepped in closer, blocking her strike with his forearm, and using her own momentum to lock her arm under his. The move caught Celira by surprise. For a brief second, her body was off balance. Ethan took advantage. Using all his strength, he shifted his weight and flipped her over his shoulder. The crowd gasped. No one had ever thrown their princess in combat before. But Celira wasn't finished. Even as she hit the ground, she rolled with the fall, recovering instantly. Her golden eyes now burned with something new. Excitement. "You really are different from the others," she said, standing up. "Your kind fights with strategy, not just power." Ethan exhaled. "Survival teaches you to think fast." Celira smirked. "Let's see how fast you can think now." Before he could blink, she was right in front of him. This time, her attack connected. A powerful palm strike hit his chest, sending him skidding backward. He barely managed to stay on his feet, his lungs struggling to pull in air. She was holding back, and still, her strength was incredible. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. If this continued, He'd run out of energy before she did. He needed to change the fight's rhythm. Taking a deep breath, he focused. Adapt. Improvise. Overcome. He watched Celira closely as she prepared for her next move. She had superior speed and strength, but she also had a warrior's pride. She liked fighting directly. Ethan shifted his stance, loosening his body, preparing for an unpredictable movement. Celira lunged again, but this time, Ethan did something unexpected. Instead of dodging, he moved toward her, ducking low at the last second and sliding between her legs. Celira's momentum carried her forward, just enough for Ethan to spring up behind her and wrap his arms around her shoulders in a restraining lock. The crowd roared in shock. For a moment, the princess was caught. But then she laughed. A bold move, she admitted, but not enough. With a sudden burst of strength, she flipped Ethan over her back, sending him sprawling. He landed hard but quickly rolled to his feet. Celira straightened, dusting herself off. She studied him, her expression no longer just amusement. There was genuine respect in her eyes now. "You're not like the others," she said. Ethan took a deep breath, calming his racing heart. "And you're stronger than I expected." Celira smirked. "You fought well, but this was not about winning or losing. This was a test." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "A test for what?" Celira stepped forward, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "A test to see if you were worthy." Ethan frowned. "Worthy of what?" She smiled, a mysterious, knowing smile. "You'll see soon enough." Before Ethan could ask more, the royal guards approached, signaling the fight was over. Celira turned to the crowd. "This human has proven his skill," she announced. "And because of that, I have made a decision." She turned back to Ethan, her golden eyes gleaming. "You will accompany me to the High Council tomorrow. There is something you need to witness." Ethan's mind raced. The High Council. That was the governing body of the Zirionians, a place where no human had ever set foot before. He didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was certain. This was far from over. The sun was high in the sky when Ethan was led through the grand halls of the Zirionian palace. His body still ached from the intense fight with Princess Celira, but his mind was focused on something else. The meaning behind her words. "A test to see if you were worthy." Worthy of what? 2 guards in dark silver armor escorted him toward the upper levels of the palace. Their heavy footsteps echoed through the polished stone corridors. Despite their intimidating presence, Ethan walked with confidence. He had faced worse. At last, the guards stopped before a large ornate doorway. It was carved with symbols Ethan didn't recognize, glowing faintly with golden energy. The doors slowly opened, revealing a massive chamber inside. The High Council awaited him. The Hall of Judgment. The chamber was circular, with a towering ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. In the center stood a raised platform, where 12 Zirionian elders sat in a half-circle, watching him with piercing golden eyes. Princess Celira stood beside them, her arms crossed as she observed Ethan's reaction. She was dressed in a deep blue robe, different from her usual combat attire. This was a formal meeting. Ethan stepped forward, keeping his posture straight. He could feel the weight of their stares, but he didn't let it show. One of the elders, a tall, gray-skinned Zirionian with intricate tattoos on his forehead, spoke first. "Human, you have proven your strength by defeating Gorek and holding your own against our princess," he said in a deep, measured voice. "Few warriors can say the same." Another elder, a woman with sharp, angular features, leaned forward. "But strength alone is not enough. We must know if you are worthy to hear the truth." Ethan's brow furrowed. The truth about what? Celira finally stepped forward, her golden eyes locking onto his. "About the war," she said. "A war older than humanity." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. The war between humans and Zirionians had raged for years, but no one knew how it truly began. Both sides had their own stories, but neither had the full truth. Salira motioned toward the center of the chamber. A holographic display activated, showing a vast cosmic battlefield. Ships clashing, planets burning, entire civilizations crumbling. The elder with tattoos spoke again. This war did not begin with your kind, human. It began long before you set foot among the stars. The hologram shifted, revealing an ancient race, tall beings with obsidian skin and glowing red eyes. They looked nothing like humans or Zirionians. The Drexians, Salira said, her voice filled with tension. A race of conquerors who once ruled the stars. They enslaved entire worlds, including my people. Ethan's eyes widened. I've never heard of them. You wouldn't have, another elder replied. They were erased from history, or so we thought. Salira turned to Ethan. The reason we fight humans is because we believe your kind was just like them. Ethan exhaled, understanding everything in an instant. The Zirionians had fought to free themselves from their oppressors. When humans arrived in space, they were mistaken for another wave of conquerors. And so, the war began. A dangerous revelation. Ethan clenched his fists. Then why are you telling me this now? Because something has changed, Salira said, her voice serious. The Drexians are still alive. The room fell into silence. Ethan frowned. That's impossible. If they were wiped out, how? The hologram shifted again. This time, it showed a hidden fleet, lurking beyond the known star systems. We discovered their movements recently, an elder explained. They have been waiting in the shadows, rebuilding their strength. And now, they prepare to return. Ethan's mind raced. If the Drexians were truly coming back, that meant the war between humans and Zirionians was a distraction, a waste of time and lives. Salira nodded as if reading his thoughts. Now you understand why I fought you. I needed to see if a human could stand against them. Ethan stared at the display, then back at Salira. So what happens now? The elders exchanged glances before one of them spoke. You must decide, he said gravely. Will you help us end this war and prepare for the real enemy? Or will you return to your people and let history repeat itself? Ethan took a deep breath. He had come to this planet as an outsider, a soldier caught in a war he barely understood. But now he had a choice. And for the first time, the future was in his hands. Ethan stood in the grand hall of the Zirionian High Council, his mind racing. The revelation about the Drexians had shaken him to the core. If these ancient conquerors were truly returning, then everything he had believed about the war was wrong. The elders watched him in silence, waiting for his answer. Would he help them? He glanced at Princess Salira. She stood tall beside the council, her golden eyes filled with expectation. Just days ago, she had scoffed at his armor, considering humans weak. But now, she looked at him differently, as an equal, maybe even an ally. Ethan exhaled. If what you're saying is true, then this war between humans and Zirionians needs to stop. We can't afford to waste time fighting each other when a greater enemy is coming. A few elders nodded in approval. One of them, the gray-skinned elder with tattoos, spoke first. Then you accept. Ethan clenched his fists. I'll do what I can. But I need proof. If I return to my people with just words, they won't listen. Salira smirked slightly. I expected no less from a human. Always needing proof before taking action. That's called being smart, Ethan replied with a smirk of his own. The elder woman with sharp features tapped a glowing panel on the table before her. A holographic map appeared, showing a region of space far beyond human and Zirionian territories. It was marked with strange red energy signals. We believe the Drexians are hiding here, she said. You want proof? Then you will go and see for yourself. A mission into the unknown. Ethan frowned. You're sending me there alone. Salira stepped forward. No, I will accompany you. The room fell into a stunned silence. A few of the elders exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke against her. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? You don't seem like the type to trust a human that easily. Salira crossed her arms. I trust actions more than words, and you've already proven yourself in battle. Besides, this concerns my people just as much as yours. Ethan couldn't argue with that. If they were going to convince the humans and Zirionians to stop fighting, they needed evidence, and that meant going straight to the source. One of the elders finally nodded. Very well. You will leave immediately. A low humming sound filled the room as a small metallic sphere floated toward Ethan. It was about the size of his palm, covered in glowing blue lines. This is a Zirionian data core, the elder explained. It will record everything you see and serve as undeniable proof of the Drexian threat. Ethan took it carefully, feeling the smooth, cold surface in his hand. Guess there's no turning back now. Salira smirked. There never was. Departure from the Zirionian capital. The Zirionian warship that would take them on their mission was unlike anything Ethan had seen before. Its sleek black hull shimmered under the twin suns of the planet, and its engines pulsed with silent energy. Ethan stood on the landing platform, watching as Zirionian engineers made final preparations. Salira walked beside him, now dressed in a fitted dark blue flight suit. You look nervous, human, she said, glancing at him. Ethan chuckled. Not nervous. Just thinking. About what? He sighed. Back home, humans think of Zirionians as ruthless warriors, and I'm sure your people think the same about us. But standing here, talking to you, I can't help but wonder how much of our hatred was manipulated. Salira's expression grew serious. More than we ever knew, I think. A voice crackled through the ship's comms system. All systems ready. Preparing for departure. Salira motioned toward the open ramp. Come on, human. Let's go find your proof. Ethan followed her inside. As the doors sealed shut and the engines roared to life, he couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was about to change everything. For both their species. The warship lifted off, heading into the vast unknown. The Zirionian warship cut through the darkness of space, its engines humming with silent power. Ethan sat in the co-pilot's seat beside Princess Salira, staring at the navigation screen. The red energy signals from the holographic map were still far ahead, but they were getting closer with every passing moment. This is the first time I've worked with a human, Salira said, adjusting the ship's controls. Ethan smirked. And, am I disappointing you yet? She glanced at him. Not yet. The ship's automated system suddenly beeped. The screen flickered, showing anomalies ahead. Ethan leaned forward. Is that debris? Salira narrowed her eyes. No, that's a battlefield. The aftermath of a battle. As the warship approached, the view outside became clearer. Wreckage from multiple destroyed ships floated in the void. Some bore the markings of human fleets, while others had the sharp, curved design of Zirionian vessels. But there were other ships too, ones neither of them recognized. Salira's fingers tightened around the controls. These aren't our ships or yours. Ethan activated the ship's external scanners, running a quick material analysis. These ships are old. Some of them have been floating here for years. Just then, a faint energy signature flickered on the screen. It was weak, but it was there. Survivors? Ethan asked. Salira didn't hesitate. We're going to find out. A ghost in the wreckage. The warship carefully navigated through the debris, avoiding large floating chunks of metal. The energy signature came from inside a half-destroyed battleship wedged between two massive wrecks. Ethan and Salira suited up and prepared for zero-gravity entry. The ship's AI confirmed that the wreck had a breathable atmosphere, but life support was failing fast. Ethan pulled his helmet over his head. We need to be quick. Salira nodded. Let's move. The ship's airlock doors hissed open, and they pushed off into space, using their thrusters to glide toward the wreck. The entrance was broken, with jagged metal sticking out like teeth. Dark corridors stretched inside, flickering lights casting eerie shadows. Ethan switched on his helmet light, illuminating the narrow hallway. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols neither human nor Zirionian. "What language is this?" he asked. Salira ran a gloved hand over the symbols. "I don't know, but I've seen something like it in old records." Before they could investigate further, a metallic clatter echoed through the corridor. Both of them turned sharply, weapons raised. "Something's here," Ethan whispered. They moved forward cautiously, stepping over fallen beams and broken wires. The flickering lights cast shifting shadows, making it hard to tell if something was moving. Then they heard it. A weak, wheezing breath. Ethan's eyes darted to a collapsed door ahead. He gestured to Salira. "There's someone inside." The mysterious survivor. They'd forced the door open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. At the center, slumped against the wall, was a figure in a tattered dark blue suit. The being was humanoid, taller than a human but thinner, with pale silver skin and long fingers. Its eyes fluttered open, revealing glowing white pupils. Salira took a cautious step forward. "Can you understand us?" The figure coughed, then spoke in a raspy voice. "You are too late." Ethan crouched beside them. Too late for what? The figure's breathing was shallow. "They are already here." Salira stiffened. "Who?" "The Drexians." The being barely managed a nod. "They move in shadows. Prepare their return. Your war kept you blind." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Where are they?" The figure lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward a large screen at the side of the chamber. Ethan rushed over and activated it. What appeared made his breath catch. A massive fleet, dozens, maybe hundreds of ships, was gathered on the edge of known space. Their designs were sharp, jagged, and alien. The Drexians weren't just preparing to return. They were already here. A race against time. Salira turned back to the figure, but their eyes had already closed. They were gone. Ethan clenched his fists. "We have to get this data back to our people. Now." Salira nodded. Agreed. They rushed back through the wreckage, making their way toward the exit. Just as they reached the airlock, a low rumble shook the wreck. Ethan glanced around. What was that? Salira's expression darkened. "We're not alone." Through the gaps in the broken ship, Ethan saw shadows moving. Figures in sleek black armor, slipping through the wreckage like ghosts. The Drexians weren't coming. They were already washing. The warship's airlock door slid shut just as the first plasma blast hit the wreckage. The force of the explosion sent debris spinning through space, but Ethan and Salira were already inside, racing toward the cockpit. "Start the engines," Ethan shouted as he threw off his helmet and sprinted to the co-pilot's seat. Salira's fingers flew across the controls, her expression sharp and focused. "I already did. Hold on." Outside, dark, sleek Drexian ships emerged from the shadows, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. The moment Ethan and Salira's warship powered up, the enemy opened fire. "The chase begins." Ethan gripped the controls. "We can't take a direct hit from those cannons." Salira's hands tightened on the flight sticks. "Then let's not get hit." The ship jerked sideways as she made a sharp turn, dodging a plasma blast that streaked past the hull. The Drexian fighters were fast, but the Zirionian warship was more agile. Activating countermeasures, Ethan pressed a sequence of buttons, launching flare decoys that exploded in bursts of bright energy. The pursuing ships hesitated for a split second, and Salira used that moment to accelerate. "We need to jump to hyperspace," Ethan said. Salira shook her head. "They'll track us. We have to shake them first." The Drexian leader's voice suddenly crackled through the ship's comms, a deep, distorted sound. "Run all you want. It will not change your fate." Ethan scowled and switched off the transmission. Creepy. Salira's eyes flickered with determination. "Let's give them something to chase." Through the asteroid field. Ahead, a massive asteroid field stretched across space. Salira didn't hesitate. She dived straight in. "Are you insane?" Ethan yelped, gripping the seat as the ship weaved between tumbling rocks. Celira smirked. "A little." The Drexian fighters followed but struggled to match the warship's sharp maneuvers. One of them miscalculated, smashing into an asteroid and exploding on impact. Ethan grinned. "That's one down." Celira's expression remained serious. More to go. The warship spun through a tight gap between two colliding asteroids, scraping the edge but making it through. A second Drexian fighter wasn't so lucky. It slammed into the rocks and burst into flames. Only one enemy ship remained. The final duel. The last Drexian fighter was faster than the others, matching every turn Celira made. "They're good," Ethan muttered. "Not good enough." Celira's eyes gleamed as she suddenly killed the ship's engines, making the warship drop. The Drexian fighter overshot them, flying right into Ethan's targeting range. He didn't hesitate. With a single precise shot, he hit the enemy's thrusters, sending the Drexian ship spiraling into an asteroid, where it vanished in a fiery explosion. Celira reignited the engines. "Now we jump." Ethan nodded, activating the hyperspace drive. The ship shuddered as space stretched around them, and in an instant, the battlefield disappeared. The truth revealed. Minutes later, the ship dropped out of hyperspace, arriving near a human Zirionian military outpost. The relief of escape was short-lived. Ethan immediately uploaded the data they had recovered from the wreckage. Holographic images of the Drexian fleet filled the screen. The fleet was huge, far bigger than anything either the humans or Zirionians had expected. "This isn't an invasion," Ethan murmured, studying the patterns of their movements. "This is a war they've been planning for years." Celira crossed her arms. "And we just exposed them." Just then, the communication panel lit up. The human and Zirionian high commands were waiting for a full report. Ethan looked at Celira. "We have to tell them everything." She nodded. Together. A new alliance. Hours later, after a tense joint meeting, both human and Zirionian leaders agreed. This was bigger than their past conflicts. The Drexians were the true enemy. Celira watched as human and Zirionian commanders shook hands, setting aside their differences for the first time in years. Ethan smirked at her. "Looks like your people and mine finally have a common goal." She smiled back. "I suppose we do." As the warship refueled, Ethan and Celira stood at the window, staring at the stars. The war with the Drexians had just begun, but this time, humanity and Zirionians would fight together. Ethan grinned. "So, still think humans are weak?" Celira chuckled. "Not anymore."